Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Tuesday, August 27, 2024. Senator J.D. Vance, the Republican vice presidential nominee, campaigns in Michigan about the economy and specifically a Chinese company's plans to build a battery factory. He and other Republicans also react to Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg's letter to Congress in which he says he regrets not pushing back against Biden administration pressure to censor COVID-19 related content and regrets downplaying negative stories about Hunter Biden after the FBI warned they could be Russian disinformation. AFL-CIO President Liz Shuler gives a State of the Union's address ahead of the Labor Day holiday, saying unions are battle ready to help Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris win in November. Former independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who has endorsed Republican nominee Donald Trump, joins the Trump transition team. We'll also hear from active third-party presidential candidates Jill Stein of the Green Party, Chase Oliver of the Libertarian Party, and independent Cornel West. Israel says its armed forces rescued a hostage in southern Gaza. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov warns the U.S. is playing with fire by considering allowing Ukraine to hit deep into Russian territory with Western missiles, and he says a World War III would not be limited to Europe. And the White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan lands in Beijing to begin meetings with the Chinese foreign minister. Story from the Detroit News. Republican vice presidential hopeful J.D. Vance spoke Tuesday afternoon on the economy and jobs at a farm near Big Rapids, Michigan. Vance made his remarks Tuesday at a horse farm owned by Big Rapids real estate agent Lori Brock, who has led some of the community pushback against Chinese battery maker Gotion Incorporated's plans to construct a $2.4 billion battery parts factory just north of the city limits in Green Township. The planned Gotion plant would be constructed about a half-mile south of Brock's farm, and the company has said it would employ 2,350 people when fully operational, producing battery components for electric vehicles and energy storage systems. That was from the Detroit News. Here's some of Senator J.D. Vance's speech.
The country wasn't broken in 4 years, and 4 years was not enough time to root out all of the corruption. So while Americans were getting richer, a lot of bureaucrats and globalists were getting poorer. That was the story of Trump's term. So Kamala Harris, she and her corrupt handlers, they came up with a plan. Now, they couldn't beat Donald Trump in an honest debate, so they decided to engage in censorship. They were going to censor Donald Trump, and they were going to censor his supporters. Now, remember, back in 2020, they lied about Biden's corruption and covered up the fact that his family got rich by selling access to the United States government, and Kamala Harris was there for all of it. They lied about the Hunter Biden laptop and encouraged big tech to silence the story, and they did. They lied about COVID coming from a Chinese lab, and they censored anybody who disagreed. Kamala Harris even went on national TV and said Joe Biden was as sharp as a tack. Even he was clearly mentally incompetent to do the job, and so it's obvious what's been going on, right? Kamala Harris has been calling the shots. And by lying about his mental fitness for the job, she got what she always wanted, which was more power. And what was the result? On her watch, gas prices are up 50%. Housing costs have doubled. You talk to a young person today, young people cannot afford to buy a home in their own country. We're turning a generation of 20 and 30-year-olds into permanent debtors. Donald Trump and I believe young people ought to own a stake in their own country, be able to build a life and start a family. That's what we're fighting for. Grocery prices under Kamala Harris are up 21%, and I think that undercounts it. A record number of Americans are working multiple jobs. The housing market is as unaffordable as it has ever been. And the average new car costs nearly $50,000. Americans, this is heartbreaking. We now owe more than $1 trillion in credit card debt, a record high at a time when interest rates are going up and up. That's not all she did, my friends. She isn't just causing high prices, she is undoing the incredible work that Donald Trump did to rebuild American manufacturing. Now, we stand very close, of course, to the new Gotion factory, right? That's right. And remember the tie-breaking vote that she cast to send inflation through the roof. Remember that vote? That vote also made Chinese companies like Gotion eligible for millions of your taxpayer dollars.
Senator J.D. Vance, Republican from Ohio, vice presidential nominee, campaigning in Big Rapids, Michigan today. You heard him allude to the letter that Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg sent to Congressman Jim Jordan, Republican of Ohio, the Judiciary Committee chair, on Monday, in which Zuckerberg says the Biden administration repeatedly pressured his company to censor content related to COVID-19 in 2021, and that the pressure was wrong and that he regrets not being more outspoken about it. Zuckerberg also expressed regret for Meta's downplaying of content related to coverage by the New York Post about Hunter Biden, son of President Joe Biden, ahead of the 2020 election that the FBI had warned may have been Russian disinformation. Congresswoman Laurel Lee, Republican of Florida, member of the Judiciary Committee, was on Fox News today.
This is a great victory for the First Amendment, for Mr. Zuckerberg to come out and acknowledge that information was suppressed about COVID. Everything, when we saw President Trump and people like Governor DeSantis trying to share information with the public about the efficacy of therapeutics, about lockdowns and whether they were working, at the time they were vilified, and the information from people who had opinions was suppressed. And to see Mr. Zuckerberg acknowledging this is really important. It shows the lengths that the Biden administration went to try to shut this information down. And the other thing that he mentions in this letter that's really critical is an acknowledgement that the Hunter Biden laptop story was suppressed. And that's something that we have spent so much time in judiciary working on and trying to bring to light, is that we have 51 intelligence officers basically lie to the American people and try to cast this as Russian disinformation when it wasn't. And that information was suppressed in the lead up to the election. So it's very important for us to be able to show, these are the real facts of what was going on then and the lengths to which this administration was going to try to hold back this information from the American people.
Congresswoman Laurel Lee, Republican from Florida, today on the Fox News channel. White House put out a statement about the COVID-19 information and Meta that reads, when confronted with a deadly pandemic, this administration encouraged responsible actions to protect public health and safety. Our position has been clear and consistent. We believe tech companies and other private actors should take into account the effects their actions have on the American people while making independent choices about the information they present. Story today from Associated Press. Special counsel Jack Smith on Tuesday filed a new indictment against Donald Trump over his efforts to undo the 2020 presidential election that keeps the same criminal charges but narrows the allegations against him following a Supreme Court opinion conferring broad immunity on former presidents. The new indictment removes a section of the indictment that dealt with Trump's interactions with the Justice Department, an area of conduct for which the Supreme Court in the 6-3 opinion last month said Trump was entitled to immunity from prosecution. That article from Associated Press. This is Washington Today. AFL-CIO President Liz Shuler begins a Washington Post article in her annual Labor Day speech the week before the holiday, said labor unions are crucial for a Kamala Harris-Tim Walz victory in November and encouraged union members to mobilize for the Democratic ticket. Shuler noted that in the swing states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Nevada, the margin for Harris among union members is 15 points. But she said polls show that if the labor movement doesn't show up to vote, Harris would lose by 2 points. That was from the Washington Post. Here is AFL-CIO President Liz Shuler today in Washington, D.C.
From the picket line to the bargaining table to the ballot box in November, the state of our unions is battle ready. Battle ready. And as much as we love the barbecues and the mattress sales, this is our week. This is about recognizing and appreciating the workers who make this country run. And last year, for the first time, we started a conversation about how workers are doing in this country. We showed you some numbers. Anyone who was here last year, maybe the numbers surprised you, and we're going to put them up on the screen right now just to go down memory lane. 71% of Americans support unions. That's right. And 9 in 10 young people under the age of 30 support unions. So that was last year. Today is about the next chapter. It's about workers continuing to find their power in 2 very distinct ways. First, We are the ones who are going to decide this election. In these swing states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, that are going to come down to 1%, 2%, union voters are 20% of the electorate. 1 in every 5 voters. Think about that. And second, our workers are powerful because they have something that is so rare today. And what that is they have the trust. They have the trust of those around them, and they are credible political messengers. They can connect with each other and people in their communities in a way that no one else can.
AFL-CIO President Liz Shuler today in Washington, D.C., giving the annual State of the Union speech before the Labor Day holiday. She said the AFL-CIO represents 13 million workers across 60 unions. Donald Trump campaign senior advisor Brian Hughes putting out a statement as President Trump's broad coalition of supporters and endorsers expands across partisan lines. We are proud that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard have been added to the Trump-Vance transition team. Tulsi Gabbard is a former Democratic member of Congress and presidential candidate who this week endorsed Donald Trump. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is a former Democratic presidential candidate who then switched to independent presidential candidate and last week endorsed Donald Trump. Kennedy spoke last night to online interviewer Tucker Carlson about working with the Trump campaign.
I'm going to work to get him elected. And I'm working with the campaign. We're working on policy issues together. I've been asked to go onto the transition team and, to help pick the people who will be running the government. And I'm looking forward to that. And I'm going to fight. I don't know what would happen to me if we lose.
Well, that's kind of it. I mean, a lot of people I know personally and I'm friends with have gone to prison. One of them's in prison right now, Pavel Durov. There are others. What happens if he loses to you?
If
Trump loses and Kamala Harris becomes president?
Oh, I don't know. But I mean, I never really think about that. What I think is
good.
What I think is, okay, here's what I got to do today. And, get up every day and say, reporting for duty, sir, and then go do that. And, nothing's a crisis. Everything's a task, right? And so that's what I'm going to be, kind of a happy warrior. I know what I have to do, so I'm going to do it.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. interviewed by Tucker Carlson, former Fox News host, now hosting a program on X. That interview done last night. Two of Donald Trump's biggest donors, Linda McMahon and Howard Lutnick, are the co-chairs of his transition team, and his two eldest sons, Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump, are the honorary chairs. A Washington Post article about other presidential candidates now that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is essentially out reads, to the extent the remaining third-party and independent candidates pull votes and even potentially play spoilers, it appears more likely to be at Kamala Harris's expense. Kennedy's exit leaves 3 significant names below Trump and Harris on at least some state ballots. Green Party candidate Jill Stein, Libertarian Party candidate Chase Oliver, and Independent Cornel West. All 3 come from left-leaning backgrounds. Stein and West are both generally further to the political left than Harris. Oliver's potential appeal is harder to define, as it often is with libertarians, but he's a former Democrat and left-leaning libertarian who defeated a more right-wing candidate in May's Libertarian National Convention. That article from the Washington Post. Both Jill Stein and Chase Oliver were on C-SPAN's Washington Journal morning program this morning. First, Jill Stein.
Our party is very different from the other options. We are a people-powered party. We don't take money from corporations, from billionaires. We don't use the big loopholes that Biden, Harris, Trump, RFK, all the big candidates use. These big loopholes. A single donor can write a check for $1 million, and it basically gets laundered into the campaign, which means that, that powerful people can exert a lot of influence from the inside. So we are basically the one party which is not taking legalized bribes, so we can actually stand up for what it is that people want, for healthcare for everyone as a human right, which is through a system that's way more efficient, cuts out the middleman, the red tape, and the bureaucracy, saves a ton of money while it covers everybody. We can bring down the cost of housing, build the housing that we actually need, so-called social housing. We can end student debt, make public higher education free, and above all, cut the military, the bloated military that's eating up half of our congressional dollars and spending money overseas, like in a genocide right now in Palestine, a genocide that's just getting the whole world into trouble. Likewise, in Ukraine, we keep pouring billions and billions into Ukraine as well. We're creating these incredible explosive situations all around the world, which are impoverishing us because they gobble up half of our budget, and they're endangering the whole world. So we are the one party that can do the right thing for everyday people because we do not have strings being pulled from the inside by the bankers and the billionaires and big pharma and all that.
Jill Stein, Green Party presidential nominee, interviewed on C-SPAN's morning program, Washington Journal. Also on that program, the Libertarian Party presidential nominee, Chase Oliver.
Broadly speaking, the Libertarian Party is the party of limiting government, cutting it down to size and returning power back to the individual or the most local government as possible. Broadly speaking, we want to cut taxes and keep your civil liberties protected is the main thrust of it. And it all involves our idea around the idea of non-aggression, that if we're not aggressing against somebody, there should be no need for the government to involve itself in our private affairs. And so generally speaking, keep government limited down to size.
Well, let's talk about some of the parts of your platform. Can you talk about your view on abortion and what your policy would be?
Yeah, so I am somebody who truly believes that your body is your body. And so I am a pro-choice candidate. I think we should have protections for women to choose to have an abortion up to the point of viability. Post-viability, there should be a doctor intervening to say that there's the health or the life of the mother is at risk in those very rare instances. But overall, I think it should be something that should be available to people who need it. And I don't want to restrict people's healthcare choices. Now, that being said, the pro-life community, I think there's a lot of things we can actually pair up on to reduce the number of abortions in this country. First and foremost, make birth control over the counter so more people have access to that contraception. And so there's not an unwanted pregnancy to begin with. You want to reduce the red tape and regulation around becoming an adoptive parent so more people choose to become adoptive parents, which provides the potential for surrogacy for those who have an unwanted pregnancy. These are steps that we can take that will concretely lower the number of abortions in this country without taking away a woman's right to choose, without taking away her medical freedom and privacy. And that's kind of where I like. And of course, I will continue to always support the Hyde Amendment. And I think that should be something that is continued to be supported, which is no federal funding going to abortion, because this is a contentious topic. I don't think people's tax money should be going to paid for it.
And what about gun control?
I'm a 2A all day guy. I'm somebody who believes in the right to defend yourself. And I think that much of the gun restrictions that we have are government removing our sovereignty from ourselves. The Constitution is clear, shall not be infringed is the wording of the Constitution. And so I seek to fight back against any infringement against someone's right to own a firearm, including, the Trump bump stock ban that was recently thrown out, the Supreme Court. I supported that being thrown out. I support, I don't support bans on, I do not support things on bans on pistol braces or suppressors or any of those things. That should be in the realm of, hey, if you're not harming anybody with your firearm, it doesn't matter what firearm you have.
Chase Oliver, Libertarian Party presidential nominee on C-SPAN's morning program, The Washington Journal. We also played a clip from another guest, the Green Party presidential nominee, Jill Stein. You can find both of these videos at our video library at cspan.org and join us every morning live at 7 Eastern for The Washington Journal. Associated Press writes the Wisconsin Elections Commission voted Tuesday to keep independent presidential candidate Cornel West on the ballot, rejecting a challenge filed by an employee of the Democratic National Committee. The commission ousted one presidential candidate, independent Shiva Ayyadurai, and anti-vaccine activist who was born in India to parents who weren't United States citizens. The United States Constitution requires presidential candidates to be natural-born U.S. citizens. That from AP. Cornel West was interviewed a few days ago on the Kiko Freethinkers podcast about whether he would ever drop out and endorse Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris.
You wouldn't, under any circumstance, endorse a Kamala Harris at this point in the game, would you, less than 100 days out?
I can't possibly conceive of it. I am committed to going all the way, trying to hit whatever tape I can hit. But see, the thing is, a few months ago, I had been saying that Biden was going to have an LBJ moment and drop out. People thought I was on the crack pipe. I said, well, I'm not. I don't have any clairvoyant powers, but I thought that he would just run out of gas. And I also projected that Trump would be on his way to jail. But that has not turned out to be the case. But you never know, because it gives us a sense, and this is something that Gramsci and others have taught us well. I think that in any particular historical conjuncture, in real time, you've got to allow for unpredictable factors. I mean, for all we know, we could be in a regional war tomorrow in the Middle East with Iran and Israel. And that regional war could spill over. Early makings of World War III. Those are real possibilities. We don't know how Putin's going to continue to respond with drones being dropped in Russia and invasions on the Russian border and so forth. So given that, when I think of my campaign, which is a moment in a movement, again, jazz-like, flexible, fluid, protean, dealing with the unpredictable. This is not a matter of an algorithm. This is not a matter of some kind of algebra. This is history and all of its riches and all of its dimnesses and follies and crimes, as Gibbon put it. But it's also ones of tremendous breakthroughs, organized poor people, organized working people, organized black people, you see. When I look at it in that way, I say to myself, Kennedy, he's been swinging back and forth. He starts with the Democrats. Next thing, I'm a liberal Democrat for the rest of my life. Then he breaks with them and goes independent. And independent more and more. He's moving toward Trump. He meets with Trump. Next thing you know, he wants to have a position in the Harris administration. They don't want to touch him with a 10-foot pole. Then he goes back to Trump. He said, dang, RFK Jr. I was already down on you talking about Palestinians are pampered, and therefore you supporting genocide as one of the most barbaric forms. Now you're going to end up really being in the fascist camp.
Cornel West, independent presidential candidate, on the Kiko's Freethinkers podcast on August 23rd. RealClearPolling.com shows for the presidential race nationwide, Democratic nominee Kamala Harris at 46.4%. Close behind, Republican nominee Donald Trump at 44.4%. And then Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at 5%, Jill Stein of the Green Party at 0.8%, and Cornel West, independent, at 0.6%. The Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines, spoke today about election security issues she is tracking. She was at an Intelligence and National Security Summit hosted by Armed Forces Communications and Electronics Association International and the Intelligence and National Security Alliance. It was held in Rockville, Maryland.
We talk about, in essence, three trends that we're seeing currently in the context of election security. That one is just the expansion of the number of actors that are involved in it, and that's something that we're watching. The second is the use of commercial firms, which is another aspect of this that makes it harder to attribute sometimes, and also to who it is that's sort of behind the screen, but also can make the effort more sophisticated, essentially because of the commercial firms' use of sophisticated techniques for influence campaigns and so on. And the third is technology. And it really is sort of the most obvious of the three, I think, to many people, which is that generative AI in particular, but just, the many technological tools that are available to folks today, including analytic tools that allow you to sort of take data and really target, for example, audiences that you want to focus in on and think about what's the information that you want to use and so on, is an area where we are obviously carefully watching and trying to ensure that we're keeping ahead of the curve in order to provide as much information as possible to policymakers and decision makers about what's happening, but also to help identify sort of opportunities for pushing back. And deep fakes, I think, is among the most, or sort of synthetic media, because you can have it in a variety of forms, is among the most challenging aspects of this, because in particular, we've seen in different elections globally how they can arise sort of very close to the election, create a reaction, and then ultimately potentially affect a situation. And that is something that we have a group that, within the IC that we work with, that works with industry, that works and uses technology that was developed by DARPA and others, essentially, that is effectively receives nominations of potential synthetic media. We then do work to effectively review that and ultimately provide information and an assessment to those who are asking. And it's a critical aspect of our work, and we are the beneficiaries, in a sense, not only of the government innovation that's been done, but really of tremendous industry innovation and work on trying to help us get better at ultimately spotting these types of deep fakes. And that is fundamental, and we can turn things around relatively quickly, and that is obviously critical, and provide the kind of analysis that then gives people some confidence in what we're saying. And I think that's also crucial to the work that we're doing.
Director of National Intelligence Avril Haines at a private sector intelligence and national security summit today in Rockville, Maryland. She also spoke about ways federal intelligence agencies are partnering with the private sector. Article from Federal News Network. She says the intelligence community will take a systemic, strategic, whole-of-IC approach to expanding its work with private companies. From Associated Press, a federal judge in Texas on Monday ordered a temporary pause on the Biden administration's new protections that would allow immigrant spouses of U.S. citizens a path to citizenship. The administrative stay issued by U.S. District Judge J. Campbell Barker comes after 16 states, led by Republican attorneys general, challenged the program Friday in a lawsuit that claimed the policy would encourage illegal immigration. Congressman Adriano Espaillat, Democrat from New York, spoke about this today on CNN.
And now we see them block a common sense approach to immigration reform, allowing 500,000 spouses of U.S. citizens to be able to regularize their status without having to go back home, and allowing them to have a work permit, and 50,000 children of U.S. citizens. This is just another extreme effort to block any and all answers to the immigration issue because of political reasons. Well, this action is just a pause. And they'll take it up again. We're optimistic and hopeful that they would understand that helping the spouses of U.S. citizens and the children of U.S. citizens is not a radical view on what we should do about immigration. We should go back to work in Congress and try to resolve some of the major issues within the broad immigration debate, such as dreamers, also farm workers, as well as family reunification. At the end of the day, a family that's divided is a weak family. And if you have weak families, you have a weak nation.
Congressman Adriano Espaillat, Democrat from New York, today on CNN. And President Joe Biden putting out a written statement that reads in part, last night, a single district court in Texas ruled that our work to keep families together has to stop. That ruling is wrong. These families should not be needlessly separated. They should be able to stay together, and my administration will not stop fighting for them. And Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, a Republican, posting on X, "We have temporarily blocked Biden's unlawful new parole-in-place program. Biden's unconstitutional scheme would have rewarded over 1 million illegal aliens with the opportunity for citizenship after breaking our country's laws and incentivized countless more. This is just the first step. We are going to keep fighting for Texas, our country, and the rule of law." Washington Today continues in a moment.
C-SPAN, where history unfolds daily. In 1979, C-SPAN was created as a public service by America's cable television companies. And today, we continue to take you to Congress and other public policy events in Washington, D.C. and around the country. C-SPAN, powered by cable.
We know you've got choices of where to listen, and we'd like to say thank you for choosing to listen to C-SPAN Radio with a free decal. To get it, just go to cspan.org/decal. That's cspan.org/DECAL. And thank you for listening to C-SPAN Radio.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast wherever you find your podcasts and on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app. Story from NBC News: a Bedouin man who was held hostage in Gaza for more than 10 months was rescued by Israeli forces on Tuesday, Israeli officials announced. Qaid Farhan al-Qadi, 52 years old, was rescued from an underground tunnel in a complex mission by Israeli commandos acting on intelligence. Israeli Defense Forces spokesman Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari said in the news briefing Tuesday. Admiral Hagari posted his statement online.
Today, Israeli Special Forces successfully rescued one of our hostages from Hamas captivity in Gaza. During a complex rescue mission, Qaid Farhan al-Qadi from the Bedouin community of Rat, who was kidnapped from Israel by Hamas terrorists during their massacre on October 7th, has been rescued. He is alive. He is back home in Israel. We cannot go into many details of this special operation, but I can share that Israeli commandos rescued Qaid Farhan al-Qadi from an underground tunnel following accurate intelligence. His medical condition is stable and he will undergo examination in hospital. His family had been waiting 326 days to receive the news they did today. But there are still 108 hostages whose families are still waiting to hear news that their loved ones are home. And they should know that we will not rest. We will not rest until we fulfill our mission to bring all our hostages back home. We will pursue the return of our hostages through all means possible. I repeat, through all means possible. Thank you.
Israeli Defense Forces spokesperson Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, video on X. Story from CNN: al-Qadi is the 8th hostage to be rescued alive in Gaza by the Israeli military since the beginning of the war in 4 separate operations. But it marks the first time a hostage has been reclaimed alive from inside Hamas's sprawling tunnel network underneath Gaza, the IDF told CNN. Also from that article, some 250 people were taken hostage by Hamas during the militant group's cross-border attack on Israel on October 7th, which also left more than 1,200 Israelis dead. Al-Qadi's rescue means 104 hostages are being held from the October 7th attack, according to figures from the Israeli Prime Minister's office and the Hostages and Missing Families Forum. Of those, 34 are presumed dead. And from Reuters, the near-term risk of a broader war in the Middle East has eased somewhat after Israel and Lebanon's Hezbollah exchanged fire without further escalation, but Iran still poses a significant danger as it weighs a strike on Israel. America's top general said on Monday. Air Force General C.Q. Brown, chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, spoke to Reuters after emerging from a 3-day trip to the Middle East. They saw him fly into Israel just hours after Hezbollah launched hundreds of rockets and drones at Israel, and Israel's military struck Lebanon to thwart a larger attack. That was the article from Reuters aboard a U.S. military aircraft. That's the Dateline. Today at the Pentagon, Press Secretary Pat Ryder was asked about the situation in the Middle East.
J.J. Green, WTOP.
Thanks, General. Question regarding Israel and Hamas. The Pentagon has said for quite a while now that one of its stated goals was to prevent this conflict from spreading. So based on what happened over the weekend between Israel and Hezbollah, how does the Pentagon view that? Does this seem to be an expansion? Because they've done attacks against each other, but these attacks were much bigger and seemingly had much more impact. How does that impact the Pentagon's view of whether this is expanding or not?
Yeah, thanks, JJ. So again, just to put this into context, when Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th, you heard us say that we deployed a significant amount of additional capability into the Middle East region and the EUCOM region in order to send a very clear message of deterrence and to prevent this from becoming a wider regional conflict. Right now, we still assess that the conflict between Israel and Hamas is contained to Gaza. You have seen the cross-border strikes between Israel and Lebanese Hezbollah since October 8th. What you saw over the weekend, of course, was a much larger scale than what we've seen previously, but it is, in our view, not a wider regional conflict at this stage. And so we're going to continue to stay very focused on de-escalation of tensions in the region, as I highlighted, and preventing it from becoming a wider regional war. Thank you.
The Pentagon Press Secretary Pat Ryder, Air Force Major General, at a Pentagon news conference. Story from Kyiv, Ukraine, from the Washington Post. President Volodymyr Zelensky said Tuesday that this month's lightning-fast incursion into Russia, where almost 600 Russian soldiers have been captured so far, is part of a larger plan to end the war in his country. Speaking at a news conference of top officials, Zelensky said he had no plans to permanently annex the region and will present his plan to President Joe Biden, along with presidential candidates Vice President Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, this fall. The main point is forcing Russia to end the war, Zelensky said. We really want justice for Ukraine, and if this plan is accepted, and second, if it is executed, we believe that the main goal will be reached. That was from the Washington Post. Zelensky's news conference was over an hour, mostly in Ukrainian, but there was a question asked and answered in English.
You now have received the new U.S. military assistance. You've received F-16s. Your new recruits are now on the front lines, and yet the situation on the battlefield is extremely difficult. And some of your Western allies are worried about whether or not you can actually win this war in a military way. So my question is there a way, is there a plan, strategy perhaps, to consider negotiating and consider perhaps giving up some of Ukraine's territory in exchange for peace and security guarantees? So, for instance, if there is an offer of guaranteed NATO membership, would that be something you would consider to sit down and negotiate and give up territory? Thank you.
Thanks so much. We are not ready to change our territories, and we can't do it to change our territories on any negotiations. Yes, that is the first. It's difficult. Yes, because this decision depends, of course, on support of our colleagues. And I hope that they will do everything further and quicker. You said about F-16. There's very good result, very good. Nobody talked about it, but we destroyed already in this huge attack of Russians. We destroyed already some missiles and drones using F-16. I will not share how many, but we did it thanks to partners that they gave us F-16s provided to us. But again, it's not enough. We're a small number of F-16, and we need to do wider training mission and etc. We have propositions to the United States. It depends on their permission. They have to be positive on it. They have to look at this real. Because we speak about our territories, not about American territories. Yes, so that's it. And about new package, I'm very thankful. I had a conversation with President Biden. He decided to give us the new package. Thanks a lot. A little problem. We need, after Biden, to bring this package home. I think this is it's small detail for big bosses in the world. We are small. We're small. but we have to be brave against Russian attacks. That's it. That's what we really need. Just all the decision bring home to Ukraine. Thank you.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at a news conference in Kyiv. Story from Reuters. Russia said the West was playing with fire by considering allowing Ukraine to strike deep into Russia with Western missiles and cautioned the United States on Tuesday that World War III would not be confined to Europe. Ukraine attacked Russia's western Kerch region on August 6th and has carved out a slice of territory in the biggest foreign attack on Russia since World War II. President Vladimir Putin said there would be a worthy response from Russia to the attack. Sergei Lavrov, who has served as Putin's foreign minister for more than 20 years, said that the West was seeking to escalate the Ukraine war and was asking for trouble by considering Ukrainian requests to loosen curbs on using foreign-supplied weapons. That reporting from Reuters. Here's Sergei Lavrov at his news conference in Moscow.
Americans have this direct association, these conversations, this talk of a world war. They think that if this happens, it would only concern Europe, which is a very showing thing that reflects the mentality of those geopolitical strategists in the U.S., because they are confident that they will just be safe across the ocean. And in this situation, one has to understand that we have our own doctrine, a doctrine of using nuclear weapons, among other things, and we are now making adjustments to this doctrine, and the Americans are well aware of this doctrine. And these are Freudian sleep. The World War III is a bad thing because we do not want Europe to suffer. That's the mentality of the Americans, mentality of masters that are sitting on the other bank across the ocean. They are certain of their safety and security, and they are confident that there would be someone else to die for them, to do their dirty job for them, not only Ukrainians, but now Europeans as well. So we heard these speculations regarding allowing to use not only Storm Shadows, but also American missiles, long-range missiles. And in Washington, an anonymous source said that there is an ongoing effort, that they are looking into a request from Ukraine in a positive light. I do not want to add anything to that. The president has already spoken on this on many occasions, and we reaffirm this once again, that playing with fire, and they are like little kids who are playing games with matches. It's a dangerous thing for adults who were trusted with nuclear weapons in West Country.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov at a news conference in Moscow. That audio and the English interpretation provided by RT, the Russian government-funded news channel. More from the Reuters article. Lavrov added that Russia was clarifying its nuclear doctrine. Russia's 2020 nuclear doctrine sets out when its president would consider using a nuclear weapon, broadly as a response to an attack using nuclear or other weapons of mass destruction or conventional weapons, quote, when the very existence of the state is put under threat. United States and China, writes Associated Press, are working to ensure the competition between them does not veer into conflict, a top White House official said Tuesday, as the two sides started talks on a relationship that has been severely tested during President Biden's term in office. Jake Sullivan, the U.S. National Security Advisor, is meeting over 2 days with Wang Yi, a senior foreign policy official for Chinese leader Xi Jinping, in a scenic lake area on the northern outskirts of Beijing. No major announcements are expected, though Sullivan's meetings could lay the groundwork for a possible final summit with the Chinese leader before President Biden steps down in January. That was from AP. Here is Jake Sullivan standing beside the Chinese foreign minister.
Good afternoon. It's good to be here in Beijing. As Director Wong said, over the last 18 months, we've had the opportunity to meet in Vienna, in Malta, in Bangkok, and indeed also in Washington, D.C. And I'm pleased to be here in Beijing for my first visit as National Security Advisor. And Director Wong, thank you for hosting me in this beautiful setting over the next 2 days. President Biden has been very clear in his conversations with President Xi that he is committed to managing this important relationship responsibly. And the outcomes of the Woodside Summit and the work we have done since then demonstrate that we are working to ensure that competition does not veer into conflict, and that we find ways to work together where our interests align. And all of that requires the kind of strategic and substantive and constructive dialogue that Director Wong was just referring to, and to which we remain committed, and our channel has been able to generate over the course of the past 18 months. So I'm looking forward to this afternoon, this evening, and tomorrow, where we'll delve into a wide range of issues, including issues on which we agree and those issues on where there are still differences that we need to manage effectively and substantively. And it will be, I think, a very productive round of conversations. And again, I thank you for hosting.
White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan in Beijing, meeting with the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi. New York Times article says this is their fifth meeting in less than 18 months, and, quote, there is much to talk about, but probably little on which they will agree. Mr. Sullivan plans to discuss working with China on limiting the spread of fentanyl and expanding high-level military contacts. He will also stress the United States' position on Taiwan and its concerns about China's support of Russia. China indicated it would raise its own objections during the talks, including over America's support for Taiwan, the island democracy Beijing claims, and U.S. controls on exports of technology to China. That was from the New York Times. Wall Street today, the Dow up 9, NASDAQ up 29, and S&P up 8. And thanks for joining us on Washington Today. Subscribe to C-SPAN's free evening newsletter word for word. You'll get the stories making headlines in Washington emailed to you every day. You can sign up at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.